The first time that I came into this space, the light was luminous. It has such an amazing feeling to it. You can feel that there's this history to it, but there's lots of life in it still. We were told that there was bats in the building, rats in the building, possibly birds in the building. So we put on our suits and our respirators just so we were safe in that regard. The goal of the project is to conserve the window and to preserve it in the current state that it's in. This is just the first step, the first phase in a multi-phase project to conserve the building as a whole and then return the window to its rightful place where it should be, which is here. Also, to do a little bit of detective work, we'll be looking at all the hardware, the type of wood, the cane as it was manufactured, the glass. Looking at all those materials in tandem should help us figure out what its history was. So this window was built post-1903 because the dedication is 1903, so we know that happened already. It's simple gridded cane windows. The arch matches the arches of the rest of the windows in the church, as does the detail at the top. It's unusual in that the protective glazing or the exterior window matches all the other windows as well in 3 sections, and then the art glass, this piece that we just took out, was installed only from the interior. So again, that gives us a little more historical precedent that the window wasn't made to be incorporated within the architecture of the building, but it was added later. So we brought the window back to the Zilani studio in Oakland. So we'll have enough space and we can safely look at the panel through all the steps. We've got this archival footage that says that the paint was added later, but historically, this is the window that's supposed to go in the space. So we're gonna mark where it was painted and then remove the remaining paint. First, we have to remove the window from its frame. We clean as we go so we don't track debris around the studio. There are additional bars we have to take off first, which indicate it already was sagging and someone attempted to support it in the past while it was still in the church. Independent of the frame, the window is really fragile, so a skilled team is necessary to transfer from vertical to horizontal. This transition is most vulnerable to more glass breaking. When it's safely on the bench, we then can remove the remaining bar and border putty so our rubbing will be as accurate as possible. A rubbing is pretty much what it sounds like. We put a vellum sheet over the window and use archival crayons to rub over the cames to create a full-scale map that we will refer to constantly while rebuilding the window. Next, we mark everything that's relevant: size of the cane, broken glass, and in this case, residue of the old paint. Unfortunately, in the past, someone tried to remove the colored paint, but they used a harsh paint stripper to remove it and didn't correctly clean it off. The result is the glass is really fragile and probably more opaque than it was originally. We're going to keep the fragility of the glass in mind throughout the conservation process. We also mark areas that are bowing or bending, so we know to be extra careful with that area. When we've noted everything, that's when we can start to remove the glass from the cane or the metal framework, piece by piece. This took longer to do than traditional lead cane because the lead is more malleable than zinc, so you can cut it with a hand tool. With zinc, you have to use power tools, making sure you only cut the zinc cane and not the glass. Then we remove sealant putty around the border of every piece of glass. We do this dry when we're concerned about the glass paint. Luckily, only the dedication has paint, so everything else goes underwater. This is faster and keeps the dust to a minimum. Next, all broken glass is joined together with epoxy. In our work, unless the piece is completely smashed, we will use the original material instead of replacing it with new glass. That's one of the major differences between conservation and restoration. In this project, we were able to use all of the original glass. We buttressed up the sides and then added the epoxy piece by piece until it was all ready to go. Zilani thrives on collaboration. I often discuss key actions with studio head Armel LaRue and the rest of the team. With this window, there are a few building options: vertical, horizontal, or pattern. After talking together, we decided on one that was the most structurally sound and the most elegant to build. Once we decided on the pattern, the building process is pretty straightforward. Again, since this is zinc and not lead cane, it's harder to bend, so we had to use a zinc bender and a small saw in order to get tight, accurate, and clean cuts. The saw is small, but it enables the builder to make very narrow, angled cuts that are accurate and clean. When a panel is completely assembled, usually the next step is to solder all the joints. But because we know the glass is fragile and any additional chemicals from the flux, which is necessary to make a smooth solder joint, could color or alter the glass more, we first taped every individual joint. We then soldered all the joints and then peeled up the tape and cleaned off any excess flux on the solder joints with cotton swabs. You don't always get results of skipping this step right away, but there have been cases where we've seen a panel that previously didn't do this, and there's a halo of corrosion over the glass afterwards. So every solder joint had to be cleaned, and then the process repeated on the other side. This window is also unique in that there were remnants of original gold paint on the zinc cane. We've seen this in other windows that were of the same time period, but it's pretty great that we found this on a window near where gold was first discovered in California. The next step is to put putty around every piece of glass on both sides of the window. This stabilizes it, and if it's part of the architectural structure, would make it weatherproof. Excess putty is then removed with whiting and a vacuum. After determining the original frame was too deteriorated to save, master carpenter Albert Wengard oversaw the team to build a new custom wood frame. We used the original as a template and checked it against the window to make sure it was a good fit. We're also thinking about having it stand independently in the museum while the church is being restored. Knowing that the window was sagging in the past, putting new support bars on it is essential. To work their best, the bars need to be anchored in the frame and be attached well to the window. We paint them too, so they won't rust. The final step is to set the window in the frame and mark where the bars go. These have to be accurate. The bars are cut at an angle so we don't decrease the structural integrity putting the bars in. The window is then removed a final time so we can notch into the frame for the bars. Next, we add putty to seal it in the frame and secure it on the other side with small wooden stops that are curved to match the frame. The conservation of this window is hopefully the first step and the catalyst in the preservation of the whole church.